good.
You're looking good. It's been a while since I've
Oh
seen
yeah, right. No makeup. No hairdo.
Cindy, we are good to go if you'd like to get started, and Brian Friedman's here as well.
Absolutely. All righty, everybody. Good morning. I'm Cindy DeWeese, President and CEO of the Clear Lake Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us today for our COVID-19 webinar series. We're happy that we are all together, not in person, but kind of in person, and so on a screen. And we're going to be talking about Texas getting back to business. To ensure that we have plenty of time for questions, I'm going to jump into a few housekeeping items first. And to ensure we have the clearest connection, if we can get you all to, except for the speaker, to turn off your camera during the presentation. We encourage you to change your display to speaker view. Then secondly, we're going to ask you to mute. And but if you have questions during the presentation, if you'll just use the chat feature, or you can email our Vice President, Sherry Sweeney, at clearlakearea.com. It's Sherry, S-H-A-R-I, at clearlakearea.com. Okay. Then now I'd like to introduce our immediate past chairman of the board and government affairs vice chairman, Brian Friedman with the Boeing Company, to introduce our speaker. Brian.
Hey, well, good morning, everybody, and greetings from the front lawn of the Boeing building on Bay Area Boulevard. Feel free to drive by and say hello. Would love to see you. Cindy, hey, a huge thank you to you and the team at the Clear Lake Chamber, and to everybody who joined on today for this important discussion. I think it will be a very worthwhile use of an hour of your time to hear from Senator Taylor and everything that's going on in the state. Also want to recognize that we have our good friend, State Representative Dennis Paul, on the line. It's great to see you, Dennis. And we also have Faye Picard, who's representing State Representative Greg Bonin. Great to see you, Faye. And I hope I'm not missing any others. That was who I saw when I was flipping through. But if I do, just shoot me a note and I'll make sure to recognize you as well. Quite an honor to introduce my friend and our state senator, Larry Taylor. I think many of you know Senator Taylor. He has a long history of leadership in our community. He served 5 terms in the Texas House of Representatives and then was elected to the Texas Senate in 2012. He's currently the chairman of the Senate Committee on Education and also serves on the Higher Education, Water and Rural Affairs, and the Budget Writing Finance Committees. He's led Texas and our community through some historic times, everything from Hurricanes Harvey and Ike to one of the most sweeping and significant reforms on education that our state has seen, both financially and in terms of academic performance. And all of us with kids appreciate all of his efforts. Most relevant to us, those of us in the business community, Senator Taylor knows us and understands our issues. He spent his business career leading the Truman Taylor Insurance Agency in Friendswood. He's won countless awards for his leadership on business issues, highlighted by BAHEB's annual he was a 2017 recipient of the Quasar Award, recognizing outstanding leaders who demonstrate strong and continual efforts to support business foundations in our region. If there was ever a leader qualified to lead us through this crisis, it's our very own Senator Larry Taylor. So please help me welcome Senator Taylor, and I'll hand it over to you, Senator. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you for that very kind introduction. Well, there's everybody. Hope you guys are doing well during these strange times. That's what I describe it as. I don't know what else to call it. Very unprecedented for our times. Obviously, we've seen a lot of things here in Texas with hurricanes and tornadoes, but this is most unusual. I have a daughter who has a special needs child who had heart surgery and all that, and she was telling me, everybody was telling me how strange this was. She realized that they've probably done about a year of this on their own. The difference is everyone else is doing it with them this time. That had not happened before. So these are truly unusual times. I will make an important announcement. I know a lot of you are sitting on the edges of your seat. HEB has removed the limit on toilet paper. So you can go out and buy all the toilet paper you want. Please don't. I guess that's a sign of things are improving. We now have toilet paper available that people can buy as much as they want. We are still going through this, as you all know, and we are in the process of opening up here in Texas. Greg Abbott announced his latest executive order on Monday. starting opening up tomorrow on Friday. It's a phased approach. I think President Trump and the White House came out with the phased thing. They announced what they were thinking about doing, I guess a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. And then I think each of the states are kind of picking up on that and proceeding on that basis. You know, we're in an interesting time because this is a classical legislative dilemma. Whatever you do, you are not going to make everyone happy. And so I think the phased approach is, from what I've heard, there's complaints from all sides. So he probably is somewhere in the right spot on that deal, because you are not going to make everyone happy on this. We have some who think we should remain shut down until the very last case, and we have some things you just open the door and get after it wide open with no hindrances at all. So I think the balance is what we're trying to seek there, and doing it in a careful manner where you start on the phases, and then you keep monitoring the numbers and see how it's going. And if you continue to keep the numbers down, they continue to fall, then you move to the next phase, and then the next phase, and eventually work our way out of this completely. Unfortunately for Texas, we're not just dealing with the COVID. I'm sure most of you are aware that the oil prices and what's going on with that, we are going to be dealing with that probably longer than just the COVID once this is all said and done, because the market's got to settle back out on that in that world. And living in the Houston area, the energy capital of the world, that's not going to be a good thing for the Houston area. So hopefully we get the COVID put together, the demand will start going back up. We get some price stability back in there for the oil to get that part of our economy going. The good news, I was here during the 80s, and those were pretty rough times. The good news, or the better news, is we are much more diversified in this area than we were back in the 80s. So it's not as dramatic of an impact as it was, but it certainly still has a significant impression upon what goes on in our area particularly, and the state of Texas. Revenues for the state, obviously with sales taxes for the most part going down, a lot of revenues come in from oil and gas exploration, so those will be down. So next session is going to be most interesting. We do have a substantial rainy day fund to help us through times like these. We are getting significant dollars from the feds that will help in some of these areas. So at this point, if anybody tells you they know what's going to happen next session with the budget, they are vastly ignorant. They're lying to you. So that's kind of an unknown. We'll get an updated revenue number from the comptroller in July to give us kind of an update of where we are. But just real quick, for the state of Texas, where we are right now with COVID, I think we now have 730 some odd fatalities. And obviously we mourn the loss of everyone, but it's still worth remembering that the vast majority of these people have comorbidities. In some cases, I think they had other serious issues that helped contribute to this, but it's obviously 730 folks passing away in this fairly short period of time is unfortunate. I think about 76% of the people in Texas who have died are from age 65 and up, with the 80 plus being the significant highest portion of that. And I'll try to do a little chart here. Can you see that? That real tall part is 80 plus on the end. That's 76%. And where it starts bumping up is about 65. Just kind of give you an idea what the mortality looks like in Texas. Significantly, most of them are 80 plus. So that's obviously a population we need to continue to look after. The governor, we laid out his plans for the phasing. He still stressed that we've got to look after and take care of our most vulnerable population, which is those who have other issues, as well as age. So, those people, as we're going through this phasing process, still need to make, personal decisions and try to do their best to maintain their safety and how they go through the, moving through socially and those types of things. Our estimated number of patients recovered, I think, is good news, 12,507. We've now, we have reported cases now of 27,000 in the state of Texas with COVID. Of course, many of those people do not have severe symptoms. The vast majority, about 10% of those generally are hospitalized. That's about what our numbers are, actually running a little less than that. our hospitalization, and here's one of the interesting things, one of the concerns we heard early on was we've got to flatten the curve, particularly for the hospitalization with COVID. And unfortunately, our hospitals, at the time, the big fear was they run about 80–85% occupied all the time. So if you had a big influx of COVID cases, that obviously was going to be a real problem. Well, with the measures we've taken and all that, we actually have our hospitalization occupancy rate now is about 56% statewide. So they're actually less occupied now during this COVID crisis than they were before. And we have about 20,000 bed capacity in our hospitals right now and I think we have about 1,542 COVID patients in the hospital. So we have a lot of capacity in the hospitals, but we obviously don't want to have that overrun, but we have done a very good job on that. For Texas in general, we now have COVID has been diagnosed in about 207 of our 254 counties. A lot of those have 1 or 2 cases. If you'll notice on the governor's executive order, he also, as most of us are going into phase 1, the counties that have less than 5 cases, which are a large number of our rural counties, they can already go to the 50% occupancy. Of course, they still have to meet other criteria to do that. But the top 5 Texas counties, unfortunately, we live in one. If you live there or live near there, Harris County has 5,986 cases, followed by Dallas, Tarrant, Travis, and Bexar. In Senate District 11, I have Galveston County, Brazoria, and Harris County. Obviously, Harris is number 1. Galveston has 554 cases, and Brazoria has 476. So a significant drop, but also a significant drop in population. The other thing we're seeing, obviously, with the COVID and the shutdown is the unemployment. And I'm sure you've heard the stories, but so far in Texas, this is updated as of, I believe, yesterday. Is today the 28th, 29th? What day is this? 29th. Now, what day is this? I don't have my watch on.
30th.
30th. Okay, so this is a couple days old. I'm sorry. But the total benefits paid for unemployment in Texas, $2.7 billion. So total claims that they've had since March 14th when they started doing this, 1.93 million cases of unemployment. Our latest unemployment numbers just came out. We're at 4.7%, which I'm going, well, that doesn't sound all that bad, but that's March data. So next month we'll collect all what else is going on in April. So I think those numbers will probably go up. But just for a point of reference, the unemployment rate in 2010 was over 8%, just to kind of give you an idea of that, where that is. I think y'all are pretty familiar with the benefits that they've given. Folks can qualify for about average of 45% of whatever their lost wages were, whether they totally unemployed or just reduced hours. But then the feds have had an additional $600 a week to everyone on whether it's just reduced hours or totally unemployed. And so I think we may have some issues when it comes time to go back to work. We may have some people who may want to stay home because they're getting more with the unemployment combined with the federal program, the $600 a week. But I think that's a minor issue. They were trying to get it out quickly, obviously, and we've had a lot of issues. I think the feds have tried to do the best they can, and anytime you do things very quickly, you're going to have issues with some people getting that shouldn't have gotten, that type of thing, and they'll sort that out. But I think it was important that they get out there quickly. We had a lot of people in real need. But as far as in Senate District 11, the unemployment, our population is estimated about 879,000 people right now. And we have a total uninsured claimant count as of the date I said, April 27th, of 38,700 right here in Senate District 11. I find this interesting. The top uninsurance claim industries, one is full service restaurants, which I was not surprised at. But second was dentist office. That was the number 2, was kind of surprised me, followed by hotels and motels, limited service restaurants, and then department stores is our top 5. And the uninsured claimants by gender, you have males, about 17,500 in Senate District 11, and about 21,000 female. And so that's been difficult, but it's good that we have those types of fallback things to help people through these types of times. But We certainly want to reduce those numbers by getting the economy back at least started. This is going to be a several week process to get it back on track. We were having an incredibly good economy with record unemployment, and it's just been unbelievably devastating that no one could have foreseen. If you'd have talked about this even back in December, January, this was one of those things that no one saw coming, but we will deal with it. Very challenging. I will tell you, for education, obviously the kids, a lot of them went to spring break and never came back. And our school systems have done an incredible job of switching over from a traditional classroom setting to being able to do online. The TEA was very helpful in that. I've talked to a number of our superintendents, but to be able to turn from a traditional classroom to an online learning environment only was done within a week to 2 weeks, which is, I can't even imagine how they pulled it off. Of course, a lot of our districts, Clear Creek, Friendswood, those folks were already doing a lot of online anyway. So they had a little bit of advantage on that. But for some of our other places, they're just starting from scratch in this. So it was very difficult. But some of the silver linings I see in all this process is, particularly in education, we've been talking about using more 21st century technology and trying to get more technology into our classrooms and using that to supplement our educational process. And this has forced a lot of people to jump into that fray and start figuring it out, and teachers realizing maybe I need to get some education on how to do this better. So I think at the end of the day, our educational system will have actually improved moving forward out of this. We'll learn some things that don't work, and we'll learn some things that work very well and help the students. I've talked to teachers, they do their lesson plans, and if the teacher's sick for a day and has a sub come in, then they've got to come back and redo their lesson plans for the next couple of weeks, try to get caught back up. So having them see how this works, to be doing it online, can help them keep their classrooms moving when they're not there. And then you have kids that are, for whatever reason, have mono or sick for some other reason, or out of school for a while. They can continue to keep up with their schoolwork. And we've actually had whole campuses closed in our state, and we had a couple even this year that were closed because of flu outbreaks. So just the idea that we can continue our education during times like that in the future and be prepared for that, I think is going to be a positive. I've been very impressed with the creativity of some of our superintendents and how they've been getting the job done. We've gone online, but a lot of the kids don't necessarily have online capabilities at home. But they've done things like in Clear Creek, we've got some apartment complex. We have a lot of low-income students living there. They would pull a school bus in the parking lot with a Wi-Fi hotspot, so the kids would have access during the day to get their schoolwork done. And there's just all kinds of things like that going on. A lot of schools have bought hotspots for the individual kids that didn't have it, and sitting home devices for kids that didn't have those already to help keep them caught up. So there's a lot going on in education. The challenge now is we're not coming back for this academic year. And the question we're working on, in fact, the Lieutenant Governor has appointed a working group of senators to work on this. He's asked me to chair that. And so we've already had one meeting talking about how do we start back up? When does that look like? And how will it look when we finally do that? And so we've had some interesting discussions, frankly, so far with just educators getting their take on it. But I've heard some pretty good ideas. There's some discussion from some about starting early and try to get a little caught up what they missed the last 2.5 months of school. And then the other thing is start early, and then also sprinkle some in next year of what they missed. So you can't necessarily get it all done within that month, maybe, but you can help get caught up a little bit, and then go back and start sprinkling in some of that for the following year. This is probably going to take a year or two transition to get through, as far as getting our kids back on track of what they missed. Possibly longer, but I think with a lot of innovation and using some of this technology, these kids will have the opportunity to do a better job of getting caught up more quickly than they would in a traditional classroom environment. And you probably know, as far as the total economy, the governor has set up his blueprint for Texas Business Open, which he announced on Monday. His Strike Force to Open Texas has been working on this for a while. And you've heard about the minimum health protocol. We've had some discussions here locally about masks being required and fines. And this order does overrule any fines. It still suggests that people use masks when they're out in social settings and not able to keep the social distancing, or people prefer that they'd like to have that anyway. So that's still a recommendation, but there's just no fine attached to it. But starting tomorrow, as you know, and here's where it's up to the people, you are not required to open your business. So a lot of people aren't comfortable doing that. So no one's being required to open, but if you do choose to open, you can open up to 25% occupancy. And there were a list of the types of, places they could open, including restaurants, movie theaters, libraries, those types of things, retailers, churches even. And of course, single person offices, you're able to go back to your office. I'm not sure how many single person offices quit going to their office, but anyway, that is available to people. And then a little closer to home for those looking for some recreation, the beaches are also opening tomorrow. We're working on some issues there because the beach patrol and the beach cleanup is all in Galveston is funded through the hotel occupancy tax. Well, you can imagine there hasn't been a whole lot of hotel occupancy tax here of late to help fund that. So they basically have their skeleton full-time lifeguard crews. I think about 12 lifeguards, and they've got 32 miles of beaches. So we're trying to help find some funds to help them, pay to get more lifeguards there, make sure they have trash pickup and those kind of things that people will be expecting on the beach. But it will be nice for folks to be at least go out there, and you don't get much better social distancing if you go out there on the beach and spread out and walk around and not get too close to people. It's very relaxing. So I think it's be good for people's mental health. I know it's good for mine if I can get to the beach. But anyway, so we're still asking in phase one that vulnerable populations should maintain social distancing and keep up with the CDC guidelines, just like they've been doing, particularly those 65 and older and those that have other health issues. We're kind of following kind of what HEB and Home Depot and some of the other retailers have been doing. There were essential businesses. They've been limiting the access to their facilities and keeping those in, and that's been fairly successful, I think, what they've been doing. So we're going to continue with that. Some of the businesses are still not able to be open in phase one, and we hear a lot about this, but bars, gyms, barbershops, and salons. And the one I hear the most about is salons. I think people are really desperate to get their hair cut. I saw one guy was actually cutting his hair with sheep shears. I'm not sure who sent me that video, but just big old huge scissors cutting his own hair. So I don't recommend that. But hopefully we can get those open pretty quick. I get a lot of questions. I'm sorry, I can't explain it either, that we can open up a dentist's office, but we can't open up a haircut. So, but I know even the dentist's office, they've opened up for the dentist, but they may not be allowing hygienists. And there's some question even as of last night I was working on trying to get that sorted out for some dentist friends on how that's going to work. But we also, for our hospitals, we already opened up for allowing elective surgery to get their occupancy back up and frankly to take care of people that need it. I can tell you during this COVID, my experience, I chipped a tooth right off the bat. Obviously I couldn't go to the dentist. I've hurt my knee, which I can't go to the doctor to get that checked on. And I had an appointment with my skin doctor that's been put off. So I'm looking forward to all those things to get kind of caught up. And that's one of the things when you shut all this down, there's a lot of other adverse things that can happen to people while they can't have access to health care. So there's a balance in all this, and that's what we're trying to find with this. Now, for the phase one is going to go till about May 18th. They'll monitor, see where we are numbers wise and all that. And then we can move into phase two, which I think you're aware, we go to 50% occupancy, still continue some of the same guidelines, and which I think is going to help just kind of gradually put this economy back on its feet and get us moving again. As far as for individual business opening, they're asking that you screen your employees before coming into work, whether that's a temperature check, asking them questions about if they're having any symptoms, that kind of thing. Don't let any employees return with any kind of symptoms return to work until they've been diagnosed and they've met 3 of the following criteria. They've gone at least 3 days since recovery without the use of reducing medications. My wife is printing something on the printer behind me there, sorry. The individual has improving respiratory systems, and they've gone at least 7 days since any symptoms first appeared. So 72 hours, no fever, and 7 days since they first had their symptoms, and that's for people who've been tested positive. In the case of employees who has symptoms and could be COVID but does not get evaluated, the individual is assumed to have COVID-19, and they have to do the same thing I just listed for those other folks. 7 days since the first symptoms, 3 days with no fever or any symptoms. And if they want to return, if they have to return because they're essential employees before the 7 days or the 3 days above, they have to have a note from a doctor explaining that they're clear to do that. And don't allow any employees with known close contact or a person who's lab confirmed to COVID. So if they got somebody in their family or a roommate or someone has it, they cannot come in until after they've completed the 14-day self-quarantine period. And that's because they're, the virus itself has a, I'm slipping on the name, but it's a hibernation, not hibernation. Somebody help me. Somebody unmute. It's a test.
Incubation.
Incubation. There you go. You win a donut. Cindy, can you send them a donut? Anyway, like I said, mask and face coverings are not required and not being imposed with a fine, but they are still recommended that they use them. They're also working on some kind of testing and tracing, and I don't really have all the details on that. There's some that's done with data, and I personally am going to have some issues on privacy and those kind of things, on how that data works, who all gets it. Some of these things can be kind of tricky. I've seen what they've done in some of the other countries, and it's definitely not something people here would put up with. Well, for example, China, but we don't model much what goes on in China, but they actually will come pick people up and quarantine them themselves and that type of thing. But basically what we're trying to do though is we're going to continue this phasing, but still monitoring our numbers, still isolating infected people, and then trying to find those who may be infected and may need to be quarantined or something for a period of time to kind of box this thing in so we could get this put behind us and move forward. But I look around and I see what's going on in Texas, and I'm not surprised because this is what we've always done. Texas is a state that was born out of challenges, and it's a state that's continued to meet challenges, whether it's, defeating another country for our independence, putting man on the moon, or putting up with hurricanes and those and almost worldwide looking floods like Harvey. We could do this. I've just been so amazed at watching people pull together and help their fellow man out and do things along those lines. We will get through this, and I'm a believer. I have faith that God's in control of this, and we just look at one day at a time, do the best we can, and make plans for the future. But know that we're going to get through this, and we're going to work together and make it happen. And I think we'll be stronger on the other side, but it's going to be a difficult challenge. I'm not trying to lessen what we're dealing with. These are tough times, and once again, combined for Texas with the oil prices and the shutdown of that industry, we've got some work to be done here, but we'll get through this. And with that, Brian, I think I'm happy to take some questions. I don't claim to know all the answers. I think I have some staff listening in as well, so maybe they can help me.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, a huge thank you, Senator Taylor, for all that info and insight. I think the way to try and do the Q&A kind of orderly, if you guys can write in the comments or the group chat area if you have a question, and then we can kind of go from there. You can also email Sherry if you have a question, and she can read it out for you if you want to send it in anonymously. And I'll start it off with the first one. Senator Taylor, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the status of the interim committees and what y'all are planning and how that's going and kind of where those are at, who's meeting, who's not, and how y'all are prepping for the next session.
Well, what's happening right now is the Capitol is closed. And so we are not having committee hearings. So all the interim work that we normally would be starting up and doing now, actually would have started during the spring, has been postponed. once again, on the Senate side, Lieutenant Governor's appointed working groups, and those will be groups that are smaller than a quorum. And so we're just having really conversations, just start brainstorming. Like I told you, I'm on a working group that has to do with public education and higher education. So I'm meeting with some of our community college presidents in the area. I'll be talking to the president of University of Clear Lake, many of our superintendents, and just trying to kind of get from them what's going on, what direction they need from the state. And one of the things I have heard, which is interesting, they would like some guidelines from the state, particularly for opening schools, because they need something that they can stand on. That this is what the state said. If you have different schools doing different things and they have different issues, and they're going to get all kind of, so they are looking for some universal guidance on some of the, what we're going to require and those types of things for schools. So we will be brainstorming and we're having conversations at least for another month or so. I'm not sure when they're going to open up the Capitol that we can start having those types of real committee hearings, but we are working we're starting right now to work on that. But it is going to put us behind. And everyone was talking about next session is going to be redistricting. And I'm not sure if you've seen, but the census has now been put back as well. So we will not even get the census numbers during next session. So now it's looking like redistricting may have to be done in a special session. So then that would probably be next summer. So what was going to be a redistricting session is probably now going to be a budget session. And I'm unfortunately, this will be about my third one. I came in during 2003, my first session in the House. We were in an economic downturn at that time. I think the revenue estimate came in way low at the very last minute compared to what we were expecting, and we had a pretty large shortfall at that point we had to work with. We did that again in 2011, and so it looks like we'll be facing that again in 2021. So, but I think it's important to have people that have had experience going through that to help guide us through these. They're not exactly uncharted waters. COVID certainly has been, but having a budget shortfall can happen for a number of reasons. But in this case, we've got a double whammy to deal with. So it's going to be a difficult session, but I think it's going to be a budget session, to be honest with you.
And do you mind sharing a little bit more about what you're hearing about how that will look, what the kind of levers that are being looked at in terms of what items you'll be looking at? Of course, the major drivers of the budget, and then the major revenue sources. Where do you get the sense people are tending to lean, and how bad do you think it will be on the scale of 2003 to the 2009 session, the previous times you've been here?
Well, first of all, in some of those other sessions, we didn't necessarily have federal help. Now, in the 2011, we had received help in 2009. Remember, the 2008 was a downturn in the economy. The feds gave their stimulus program in 2009, so that helped us through that budget. But then in 2011, that money was gone. That's when the difficult part hit the state budget. In this case, we will probably have some federal money again this coming session. That's why I really can't tell you, because I don't know where that number is going to end up. I know education, we've already received $1.2 billion from the feds just for K through 12. And from what I'm hearing, we'll expect to receive some more even for that. So that's going to help in that regard. Now, you have to understand that in the state budget, half the budget is pub ed and higher ed. So when we talk about any kind of shortfall, we've only had to cut public education one time. That was in 2011. A lot of things we did last session will help smooth that over. In fact, when 2011 happened, at the end of the day, we were facing like a $17 billion shortfall. Don't quote me on the number, it's been a while, but we had significant shortfall, and that's half our budget. And at the end of the day, we cut public education, I think 4% the first year and 6% the second year of the budget, which seemed pretty reasonable when I talked to people in their own business, and they cut 6-8% expenses every year. But it was a huge hit to public ed. We found out later why that was. And this gets kind of complicated. I won't get too deep into it, but we were under a prior year valuation. And so not only were they facing the shortage of funds from us that year, but they were receiving money from the state as if based on their prior year valuations. Well, their valuations in the year of the crisis weren't good. So they were getting a double hit. So we fixed that this last session. We now have current year valuations for school districts. So when we thought they were getting 4 to 6% cuts, some of them were getting 8, 10, 11% because of that, the way the valuation of the property taxes were done. So we've helped with that last session. So like I say, the stories yet to be told, where the feds are, when the economy comes back, what happens with oil prices. You know, we don't come back in session until January. We'll get an update from the comptroller in July, and then we'll get an update right before we go into session. But it's, I mean, I can imagine it's going to be difficult.
Yeah. And I was in Austin quite a bit during the 2009 session, I remember it.
Yeah.
So hoping that the feds and oil prices start coming back and we end up in a better spot.
And I'm on the finance committee, so I'll be right in the middle of that. In fact, I'm on the legislative budget board. That group of people is a smaller group, makes decisions in the interim. If something happens between sessions, the LBB is the one who has to be in charge of moving money around if we have to during the interim. So we may very well have some meetings with that, but we've not had any discussions like that yet. So we're still, the good news is, and there's good news in this, the fact that Texas has a biennial budget, we budget for 2 years and we're in the first year of our budget. So there's a whole lot of money we have not expended that was expected to be spent in the next year of this budget. So we have the ability to kind of move money around to help us get to that session. Our fiscal year actually will end in September of 21. So people don't understand that. We come in session, we're still in last budget. So we had the ability to move some money around that was budgeted in the second year to help us get through the first year and vice versa. So we could kind of come in session and make up for some of that in a supplemental budget, that type of thing. And we have a large rainy day fund. I think it's about $11 to $12 billion sitting in the rainy day fund right now to help us through times like these. So we have some things to work with that's going to help us get through this.
Great, thank you. We have a question from one of the folks online. Says, it sounds like the return to work rollout is for specific businesses and not for all of the businesses. Is that correct? If so, is there any talk of when all businesses can start returning to work? So I think that's going back to the governor's order and kind of his priorities of rollout.
Yeah, in phase one, he specifically listed businesses, you know, retail, restaurants, and in phase two, I think you start opening up to more as well as increasing the occupancy. And I don't have that right in front of me, but that is correct. The point is we're rolling out where all of them are open, including salons and the ones that I've listed. Now bars may be towards the very end because that's obviously not a lot of social distancing goes on in a bar. I'm not sure why that is, but so I mean, I don't know. The liquor to go and beer to go has been helpful, I think, for a lot of folks. But obviously, people don't want to go to a bar and get something to go, and they want to go socialize. So those will be in the phases to come. And I'm sorry I don't have those phases in front of me.
Yeah, thank you. And I know I saw that the governor posted yesterday that it sounds like liquor to go may stick around for a little while longer. And so some good news for that constituency. And
well, that was done to help restaurants particularly, you know, because they were really getting hit hard, and allow them to at least sell a drink to go was somewhat of an aid for them. I think that would probably require legislation to continue it forever. So, but there has been discussion about that before. But you know, once again, I don't think restaurants, that's their biggest deal, is liquor to go. Now, some bars have some real specialty drinks people might want to get to go. And I know we had little daiquiri places. They put they leave a little paper on the straw so it's not an open container. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, who's ever seen that?
Thank you, Senator. I will say for David, the document that the governor posted, the Open Texas book, has a lot of the guidelines about how all the rollout. It's pretty easy to digest as far as those things go, and so would encourage David to go take a look at that. We got another question that was sent in that says, quote, "We've had our pay reduced by 20%. Does that qualify for any type of benefits?"
Yes, even for self-employed people. We've changed some of the unemployment rules, or they've changed the unemployment rules to include self-employed. Normally, self-employed doesn't qualify for unemployment insurance, but during COVID, they do. So if you've had reduced hours and reduced pay for that, you do qualify, and that would actually qualify for the $600 from the feds as well.
Great, thank you. Another one that we have came in, talked a little bit about elections in November and kind of what the status is for those and some of the announcements that have gone out around that, and kind of your confidence level and us being able to hold them safely, securely, and to have them at all mail versus person, whatever.
Yeah, well, several issues in that. That's a pretty loaded question because there's a lot of things going on. But for one, I hope we're in a much better place by November than we are today. Secondly, we've had, there's discussions between particular municipalities and school districts who are planning on having elections in May of this year. Bond issues, city council elections, those kind of, they're concerned about being put in the November election with a big nationalized election and that affecting their local elections. So and there's a runoff coming up in July for the primaries, and they were some of them were trying to get that, and that's still, we've run that up with the governor's office early on, and they were kind of rebuffed on that as far as allowing them to go to July. But then when I got one last request just this week to ask that again, so I've gone back and asked, and they told me they're looking at it and thinking about it. But the way the law is right now, they're supposed to be on uniform election dates, and the uniform election dates are May and November. So it looks like they'll probably be in November unless the governor chooses to put that in one of his emergency orders, executive orders to do that. And then we've had the other thing talking about mail-in ballots. Now this sounds like, oh yeah, mail-in ballot, that makes a good idea. But you have to understand mail-in ballots has been, and this is agreed across both parties, has been the #1 source of fraud. And I don't think we want to have an election that's allowing to have what we know is out there is fraud. Every time a vote is done illegally, it steals a vote of a legitimate voter. So there's a real concern about opening up to just 100% mail-in ballot. Now, I think we'll be further along by November. The question is on the July ballot, do you allow mail-in ballot for that? And I think there's a big pushback. You have to understand primary runoff elections are so small in turnout. They have a week to show up to vote, full week of early voting and election day. So I think we could run that election with the general turnout that we normally have in those types of elections. We can do that and still allow social distancing and all the CDC guidelines to be carried out for people to do those elections in July without having to do 100% mail-in ballots. Did that answer
Great.
all the questions?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Senator, can you talk a little bit about COVID testing and what the state is doing and how you're feeling that's going in terms of giving data to businesses and to everybody, just to make sure that we kind of have a good grapple on how we're doing?
Well, the testing has been an issue, and we've had to spin that up over time, but it is really getting up to being pretty robust. We've got a lot of mobile sites. I'm trying to find my notes from the last governor's call we had. But they are doing a lot of tests all over and drive-through testing, and they've got faster tests. Obviously, that's a big part of how you monitor how this is going. You've got to be able to measure where you are. And we have really beefed up that. It's taken a little while to get it spun up, but it's there. And I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I'm sorry, but well, I've got 309 locations in Texas where you can get tests. We're 4th highest in the nation for the number of tests given. So we've come a long way, and the military is actually helping. We have the military pushing about 19 million. I'm sorry, meals. They're helping with meals, and also helping with some of these tests. So we've got the military out helping on a lot of these ways to help us get through this. But the testing is much more robust, and we've got a lot of places where we've had testing available, and they're not getting the the overwhelming response that people were asking about early on. So wait, I'm getting a note here. 300 test sites, 17 mobile. Capacity is at 15 to 20,000 per day, and the goal is 30,000 per day, I think within about a week. So those numbers have definitely come up. We were talking about in the thousands earlier, like 1,000 here, and now we're talking about 15 to 20,000 per day, soon to be 30,000. So those numbers have come up quite a bit. I want to thank Carrie for letting me know about that.
And I appreciated that about the governor's plan, that one of the metrics for a further reopening on the 18th is making sure that our numbers are still looking good and that the trends are heading in the right direction.
Right.
So that we don't find another spike where we're having to shut down like this again.
And everybody needs to understand, so if the numbers go up and people don't do a good job on phase 1, if we see those numbers starting to spike, we will have to make some adjustments. I'm not saying we'll have to shut down, but we'll make some adjustments in phase 1 and what we've allowed, and maybe see where the problems are happening. and make some adjustments on that. So it will be monitored. This is not just being thrown out there and let's just hope it works. It's being, like you do it at NASA. You test them and you run them, and you test them and you run them, and if that works, you keep moving forward. And that's what we're going to try to do with this. Once again, this is a challenge, but I can't imagine any other state I'd rather be in than this one to take this thing on. We have the brightest and the best right here in this state, and we have the can-do attitude that we will get this done, and we're not going to let this thing beat us. So I'm very confident that we will get through this, and we're going to lead. We're going to lead on this, on getting out of this COVID crisis, and we're going to have to do that with our oil on our back as well, but we're going to do it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Let's see, does anybody have any other questions? I don't see any others in the chat, but feel free to type one in. Senator, I'll toss out what may be a final question. It's kind of a fun one. So we've all been sequestered in our houses and quarantining in place and social distancing. What has been your funnest moment or most unique or memorable moment since we've all been in quarantine?
Well, I've watched more TV than I've ever watched. I'm actually watching like Netflix series and stuff that I have never, ever done. Now, I'm still pretty busy during the day. I've pressure washed my house, my driveway, my sidewalks. I've done more chores. In fact, the room I'm sitting in, I've been working on cleaning out here for the last 3 days. I've gotten a lot of chores done, but I tell you, I've also been outside, and I encourage people, you need to be outside. When you're dealing with a pulmonary issue like this, the best thing you can do is get fresh air and sunshine. So even if you're social distancing, there's a lot of ways to do that. For me, I've gone out and I walk a lot of golf courses these days, out walking. I have a little electric caddy that carries my caddy, and I go out there and walk. And it's, between how many holes I play, it's between 3 to 5, 6 miles a day. So I try to do that. And but I do recommend people, just for your sanity's sake, you got to get out of your house. I can only take some of these TV things, and I've done a lot of these. I've spent more time on more conference calls, and these, we used to have work. Well, I don't guess I ever really had working hours in this job, but I find a lot of people working hours are now 9 o'clock at night. They're still doing things and calling me and texting me with questions. So this has been an unusual time. It's going to be memorable. We are now a part of history. Now, this is something we can look back on and tell folks, oh yeah, I was there and here's what I did. But I'm ready for it to be history, to be honest with you, and move on so we can look back on it. And human nature, that we tend to remember the best of the bad times. So I'm looking forward to that as well. But it's just been one of those things. And I know for some people this has just been devastating, and I cannot imagine. I'm fortunate that I'm at the stage where I've retired, so all I'm doing is this Senate work. If I was having to still run my business and be worried about my employees, I cannot imagine. But I am happy that they, this time with the stimulus money, they didn't just give it to big companies, they gave it to even small companies. And I know in Texas, the Small Business Administration is given, as of April the 6th, issued 28.4 billion loans in Texas to over 134,000 small businesses. I know that didn't get to everyone, but that's so helpful for so many to help keep them afloat during these rough times. But we're going to get through this. I'm a little concerned how we're going to pay for it at the federal level once it's all said and done, because when you're talking about trillions of dollars, the people on this call right here are not the ones going to be paying for this. It's going to be our kids, our grandkids, and maybe even our grandkids, our great grandkids. So, but I think it was important that we had to do what we had to do. So, but I sure appreciate the chamber, what y'all are doing, keeping your communities going. You guys are such a vital part of every one of your communities, and your chamber in particular does a very good job of doing that. And I appreciate y'all.
Appreciate that, and appreciate you, and great words to conclude this session with. So, Senator, a huge thank you for your time today and your insights and your leadership and all that you're doing for us here in the community and in Austin and around the corner. I think I see Terry and others, everybody saying thanks. So with that, Cindy, I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Senator Taylor, for being here with us today. I know it was short notice to get on your calendar, but I appreciate you saying yes to my request. But we mostly appreciate your leadership and your commitment to our Gulf Coast region. you mean a lot to us, and I love your background. Now,
And now I'm
you're,
at the beach, so
now
y'all
you're
have fun.
surfing, aren't you? Off to surf. But thank you again for being with us today. I've got a few announcements to talk about. Later today at 4 o'clock, we're going to do a virtual business after hours. So we would love to see all of you join us for that.
Cindy, how does that work?
Well, it's really interesting. You have everybody's face up there and people are talking and we ask questions and introduce each other, and join us. It's a lot of fun.
I'll see if I can't do that.
Okay, 4 o'clock today. So, and we'll send you the login information or the Zoom in information. Next Tuesday, you'll hear from Dr. Glenn Friedman at our May Business Development Seminar to discuss the new normal of virtual meetings, specifically client interaction. On Wednesday, our young professionals are getting together for their monthly lunch bunch. Bring your own lunch. It's virtual, of course. And they're going to have a 90s theme party. So they were all born in the 90s, I guess. So they remember them well. Then finally, our next COVID-19 webinar is next Thursday. And we're going to speak about mental health and how to grow personally and professionally after these trying times or difficult times. So join us for that. Don't forget to register for those. You can check those out on our website and also check the calendar for upcoming programs and events. Additionally, we are rescheduling some of our special events that we had to postpone: the golf tournament, the Business and Wellness Expo, and our ever popular bowling tournament. So keep an eye out for your emails to let you know when those dates are coming up. So thanks again, everybody that participated today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you again, Senator Taylor. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you all very much. Y'all have a great day and hang in there.
All righty, thank you.
Thanks, Larry.